Welcome back, everybody. So I am here with Marim, who is you can see on the screen right next to me, and we're so excited to start talking with you about sustainability and innovation, and really why we need women to be a part of that. So, Maryam, if you could please go ahead and just introduce yourself to all our participants that we have here.
Definitely. Thank you, Sandra. So I am Maryam Telmisani. I'm a sustainability and change management consultant. I also work as the Chief Sustainability Officer for Modern Leading Buildings. And before that, I used to work for many companies as also the Chief Sustainability Officer. On top of that, I'm the chairwoman for the United Nations Global Compact in the local network of Saudi Arabia. So I do a lot of sustainability work with companies as a recent freelance consultant. And with the United Nations, we lead sustainability in the business sector of Saudi Arabia.
Perfect. Great. Thank you so much. So you can see that Maryam is very experienced when it comes to sustainability, and it's something that we really share. So it's a joint passion that we have. So Maryam, let's talk a little bit about how are sustainability and innovation linked. And while we're doing that, if we could just have the first question pop up here for the poll. If you, dear audience, could please answer, do you think that sustainability and innovation are linked at all? Maryam, go ahead.
All right, so that's a very good question, and it is important for people to understand that they are so linked, they're so interchangeably important for each other. Because one reason is that sustainability is changing and making sure that your impact across your operation, your culture, on all elements of sustainability, whether it's social, environmental, or economic, that you have minimum a negative impact and you increase your positive impact. So in order for you to do that, you have to improve and change the way you used to work. So all the research and all the stats shows that when you do sustainable innovation, you involve making intentional changes to the company's products, services, processes, and generate a long-term social and environmental benefit while still creating economic profits for the firm. So indeed, they are linked, and one cannot go without the other.
So there's this common prejudice that when you innovate for sustainability, it only costs you money. What do you think about that?
Well, some of the sustainability elements, because usually people think that sustainability is only about environmental impact. So let's do those solar projects, let's change the way we work with energy consumption, with water, and so on. So these usually come with a lot of investment at the beginning, but it equally results in efficiency, which is reducing your costs for the long term. So another sustainable initiative when it comes to social, gender equality, inclusiveness, and so on, they come with zero cost. So working with that will also improve your economical benefits for the long term without investing in any cost other than just fixing the way you work. So not all the time sustainability is going to cost you, even at the beginning of the investment.
Yeah, absolutely. That I totally agree with that. When we innovate at Hype or when I see that with our clients, it's exactly the same thing, especially when we talk more about diversity and inclusion, right? We really benefit in innovation from that because of the reasons that I showed you during the introduction, right? When we reduce the bias, when we have more people join at the table, then we have bigger creativity. We have more options that we can take, and we can differentiate as a company so much better than if we're all thinking in exactly the same way. So I totally agree with that. And when we take a look at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, they're not just on the ecological side, like you were mentioning, but they're really spread across the whole social side and everything. By the way, Women in Innovation is a sustainability and innovation initiative because it connects exactly these two things.
Two goals.
So I thought that you were very convincing. 100% of the audience thinks that sustainability and innovation are linked. So thank you for sharing your opinions on that. Now, let's talk a little bit about women, Miriam. What do you think? Are they involved in innovation? How are they involved? What's been your experience with that?
Well, to be very honest, Sandra, the gender equality topic is still a thriving one. So, if we look at recent stats, a mere of 28% of people in senior management roles are women. Only 98% of the C-suite are females. But it gets much worse when we look into stats when it comes to the IT, where only 26% of computer science related jobs are held by women. This is compared to the overall job market. So, women are still not so much involved in the innovation sector. And of course, this is tied to so many reasons, including the bias, different standards, the workplace cultures, and other mega barriers. If we look into the details of those barriers, for examples, when WIPO experts detailed why aren't women so much involved in innovation, it goes back to the foundation of how these women and the gender equality was spread in the social and economic life. So most of the countries, they have fewer girls than boys studying the scientific, technical, and engineering mathematical subjects, which is the STEM. So in consequence, you will see lower portion of women involved in this kind of field in the future. And more, the inequalities reflect like perceptionist and stereotype about girls and women, where they are limited to certain jobs or certain traditional roles rather than being potentially leaders in science and technology and business and art. So if we don't challenge those stereotypes, the inequality itself can be perpetuating, because girls and young women, they need or they currently lack role models. I mean, when you talk to them and you ask them like, who's a role model female innovator, it is so limited to what they have. So again, another major factor is inflexible economic and social structure, where women again are restricted to certain career prospects, and this is the glass ceiling. So she might catch a career in IT, but she could not get promoted due to different reason. And when she's married, it gets harder and harder, and so on. So these are issues also that you can also dig deeper in the intellectual property part of it. Some have criticized that there are even in the laws of that, things that are against, that are more like feminist, coming from a feminist perspective. There are certain elements of the law that embed bias against women. So that's why now a lot of organizations are developing to fix that.
Yeah, for sure. No, I can just agree with you again. And that was like one of the reasons why we founded this initiative, actually, is the whole topic of role models, right? If you're constantly being told, oh, you can't do this, or if there's nobody that you can look up to and see,
Look
but
up
she
to,
did it, now
definitely.
I can do it too, then it
Yes.
becomes really, really difficult. And so one of the main motivators for me was also not to just show specific women, who are doing that, but showing women from all different backgrounds
Yes.
how they can do that. So I am joining today from Germany, for example, but you're joining from Saudi
Yes.
Arabia.
Saudi
So
Arabia,
we
yeah.
will have very different, women looking at us and identifying, with either of us, maybe. So I think that is just something that is really, really important when we take a look at that here. And what becomes very obvious during crises, now we're seeing it, for example, during COVID, but we're also seeing it with the war in Ukraine right now, is that we bounce back to old stereotypes. We go back to old role models. So in COVID, a lot of women started, taking on again a lot of the care work, making
Yes.
sure that, their kids were going to digital school, making sure that all of that was working, all of that rose with women again, not so much with men. So that is something, it's very fragile. It's something that the progress that we've already made is really, really great, but we have to make sure to keep it and to make more
Exactly.
progress, because it is so easy to hold it back. And it's actually something that is hurting not just women, but also men. When you take a look at the war in Ukraine, for example, then the old way of doing things is that women and children get to leave, but men have to
Men
stay,
have to
right?
stay.
They have to fight. They have to be in a war, whether they want to or not. So it's not something that is just for us, even though this is a Women in Innovation event. But it's really something where bias is hurting everyone. And so that is something why we have to be conscious of it and why we have to do something about it. Now, speaking of doing something about it, there are organizations who are doing something about that. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Definitely. So since I have started mentioning WIPO, now they are also taking leading role in putting policies and gender equalities and putting the gender equality a cross-cutting objective in all of their work. So they want to make sure that the research it involves continuing and extending pioneering to both genders, a woman and men as well. And of course, we have the UN Women, and they are focusing on developing markets for innovations that advance the gender equality. And they integrate gender issues with innovation, promoting women as innovators and entrepreneurs, and investing directly in technology and solutions that meets the needs of women and the girls. And also recently, they have launched the Global Innovation Coalition for Change to drive industry-wide action. And they have three different work streams, which is the Gender Innovation Principle, She Innovates Global Program, and For Good programs in South Africa, which mainly focuses on women and innovation. And I really like the one in South Africa because they deal with different areas of sustainability. It tackles environmental, it tackles society, it tackles the economic itself. When women are held like and they're empowered to look at ways to improve how they work with like their farms or how they work with the household and so on, this escalates things and it creates, it betters the entire society, the income of the economic of the city itself, and so on. So these programs are very, very motivating for women. And also there is WIN, which is a community for innovators. And it's also, again, shortened for Women and Innovation. And it's just a community of innovators working together to create pathways for all women.
Absolutely. So, question to you guys in the audience now.
Yes.
Do
Did
you
you know?
know about these UN initiatives that Miriam was just mentioning? If you could just fill that out. I know it says she can and she innovates right now, but you can also just think about like the more general aspect of what Miriam was just talking about. I do think that these initiatives are very, very important and they're globally important. But I also think that there's a lot that companies can do about that. And there's a
Yes.
lot that I'm seeing my clients do for gender equality to make sure that, there's a fast track for women to get promoted, to get them curious, to sponsor events at universities, at schools, in STEM areas where we can really, you know, get women to be more interested in that. So of course NASA, for example, has a very famous outreach program with Space Camp that is going out to all kids, so boys and girls, which is something that is just really important. So I think that in the public sector, there's a lot that we can do about that. There's a lot that governments can do about it, but there's also a lot that just like regular companies can do about that for their employees, but also going further into the communities, into schools and
Yes, it's very
anywhere where you
important.
can get education, basically, where you can say, okay, this is something that we want to empower now for the good of the entire society, right?
Yes.
Because often it sounds like, that's women doing it for women. It's like this exclusive club. But what we're seeing is that really these innovations that come out of like women inventors and these things often benefit entire societies and communities, because women tend to, not all, of course, so that's again biased stereotypes, but we do tend to, in general, think more about how can others benefit from that and to go around that. So now I'm just looking at this poll, and it turns out that 90% of people didn't know about that. So
Yeah.
I really want to encourage you to look that up and to go and find out a little bit more about these UN initiatives, and maybe you want to take part in them and participate. And that's really something that I can encourage you to do. Is there anything, Miriam, that you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to tap to the point that like companies, when it comes to gender and diversity and inclusiveness, I mean, we see a lot of them doing those, okay, let's have more women in the senior positions, managerial positions. But you brought up a very interesting point that we need women to be involved in at least the brainstorming of like innovative ideas, because even within their roles, they are capable of inventing like new ways, new solutions to brainstorm. And I mean, the history have shown like people like Grace Hopper, who invented the computer, Maria Beasley, like, the life raft, Marie Curie, the theory of radioactivity. So we are capable of doing a lot of things. So I do also encourage that. And now working as a consultant for the Fashion Commission, which is part of the Ministry of Culture in Saudi Arabia, I am coming across a lot of interesting innovation in the fashion world, and they're all led by women. And this comes like as a natural thing because, you know, it relates to what we do. But I am really, you know, impressed by the way they're innovating in textiles, regenerative materials, vegetable-based fibers. You know, that is only to take care of the environment, to take things to a next level in sustainability. So this is really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting observation that you make there. Because I mean, I've been in the field of innovation for almost 6 years at this point. And two and a half years ago, I switched into sustainability and innovation.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, my world got a lot more female. So there is really a lot more women innovating for sustainability or being sustainability managers than there is in the traditional innovation world. And I thought that was very, like, I was very curious about that. Also, when we take a look at these high up sustainability positions, like chief sustainability officer or something, they tend to be women. So a
Yeah.
lot of the clients that I speak to that are not innovation managers, but rather on the sustainability side, tend to be women. And then when you do put them together, so our client Vilo, for example, who where Jenny is going to do a roundtable moderation here today as well from Vilo, they did this initiative where it was really about putting sustainability and innovation together to with their entire, like all of their employees, to innovate for sustainability. And it is something that was really, really good match. But yeah, it's an interesting observation that all of a sudden then we tend to see more women in this
Yeah.
field.
Very true.
So before we go any further, quick question to the audience again, and I promise that this is going to be the last one for this session. Do you have any role models for you as women in innovation? Like, what are some of the women in innovation you admire? Just put them in the chat, and then I'm going to ask you, Maryam, the same question. Like, what are some of the examples? What are women innovating for women? Who are you impressed by? What can you share with us?
All right, so Sandra, this is a topic I really like, and the thing is that women are innovating, as we mentioned. Like historically, it was not limited to innovations just are that are specifically for our gender. No, it was things that changed the entire society, the world, in a bigger perspective. But I like it when women prove that they can innovate things that relates to women. And we are seeing currently like a lot of ads on from brands like Adidas, for example, where they are now promoting that first the new shoes for women. For centuries, they've been designed by men, and the foot design was by men. So now, only this year, only recently, they decided to bring a female on board to design shoes that actually is fit for a female foot. So the size, the measurements, everything, the way, the comfort, the feel. So it makes it more relevant. And this is where you create an economic benefit out of things, you know. So it is relevant to women. They see, and we can see a lot of inventions, like for example, the Beat, which is a bio tracker, carefully designed for women to be worn all the time. It comes like a jewelry, and it tracks it. The technology behind it is just amazing. And because it's a woman that invented that, you know, she took into consideration different aspects. So it could be clipped on your bra, your top, it could be worn as a bracelet, as a necklace, and so. And another example is Naya invention that made the pumping for women more comfortably, the breast pumping. And another one is the Things, which is a new technology for underwear, a high-tech underwear that makes period less of a hassle, preventing leaks and so on. So these kind of innovation really tackles the area that only women can innovate for women, because how can a man understand what you go through during your period, or what are like embarrassing to you? So I always love to look at those kind of things. And there's also Olivia June, who innovated Paul, because when she moved to San Francisco, she could not communicate or find a community of new friends. So she took the dating apps to the next level and created like a friendship application to do so. So these are very interesting innovations. Like for me personally, I love it when women do that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm just looking at what the audience is saying here. So we have Marie Curie, of
Yes,
course,
of
who
course.
is, of course, one of the greatest women
Yeah.
in innovation. And this person who's sharing it even says that she was the reason why She studied chemistry.
Studied and
So
oh,
that's
that's
the impact of role
yeah,
models,
yeah,
right? So
yeah,
that's right there that is happening. Then there is Princess Zara Aga Khan.
yes.
There's Katrin Koifa in sustainable finance. There's Ellen MacArthur, Florence Nightingale. Um, the mothers of the German Basic Law. They have initiated a great deal that has improved the status of women in German society. And then there's Melinda Gates. So, yeah, all of these are really, really great examples. And if I can add just a personal note to Melinda Gates, if you haven't read her book, go ahead and
Go
read
ahead and
her book.
read her
That
book.
was one of the best reads
Yeah,
of my life,
yeah,
honestly. She does such a great job of taking a look at women and making them relevant, right? So looking at the data that is behind it, so many women were even surprised that they got interviewed, that it mattered what they had to say. And
true.
she looked at sex workers in India, women in tech in the US. So there's a whole big range, and it's always data driven and then personal examples that go with it. So big shout out to that book. Here is Frida Kahlo, who's also mentioned. Then we see Astria Fataki from Togo, is a woman in innovation who inspires me as the founder of Energy Generation. That's
Yes,
a great example. Thank you for that. Ada Lovelace. And then somebody's saying, my role model has been Rana El Kalyubi, who has brought emotion into artificial intelligence.
intelligence. Yeah,
Author of the book Girl Decoded. That is also a really, really great example. Then we have the Turkish couple who's behind the leading vaccine in Germany. Yes, of course, that was also a great example. And then somebody is saying, thank you, Maryam, for sharing your role model. I did not get all the names. Can you write them in the chat? Yes, we're going to add those to the
we're
chat
gonna
later
add those.
on.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for sharing that. And we're seeing that, you know, women do have an impact. Let's talk specifically about innovating for sustainability.
Yes. Okay.
Miriam. Why is that important? And maybe when we think beyond diversity, when we think beyond gender equality, maybe some of the ecological sustainable development goals, why are women important for those?
Well, it is very well known. We are responsible for the household, right? So energy, water, everything, caring for the children, the travel, the expense, everything goes under women. So for us to be able to, first of all, get the knowledge on sustainability, how to act sustainable, how to preserve those resources, and then think how can we innovate solutions, to make this a better place. And with like the woman and the motherly nature of women, we think of the future generation. So we take this seriously. And this is why we find a lot of examples in women innovating in sustainability. And I was so happy to look at younger generations that are coming up with new innovative, sustainable innovations that are really, really helpful in so many areas. And I will share with you a couple of examples, like Natasha Boulding, who is transforming plastic waste into carbon negative building materials. So this is called Sphere. And we have Anja Stoletti, and she is combining 3D printing with traditional casting. This is to revolutionize the additive manufacturing at her factory, enable manufacturing. We have the smaller ones, like Lily Bornspill. She created the spill-proof eco-friendly cup because of like her grandpa, he had like Parkinson's disease. And at the age of 11, she was able to come up with this innovative idea. We have Deepika Kurup, who created the low-cost water purification system. And at the age of 14, Azda Abdelhamid, turning plastic into biofuel at the age of 16. So you can see a lot of inspiring women, who are taking roles with sustainability innovation related. And I as I told you, I think this is coming because we're so passionate about what we do. We really care about the upcoming generation. We want to take this role super seriously.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's just one thing that I would like to add to that that completely like astonished me when I got to know about that. So, you know, when it comes to having decision-making roles, when it comes to climate, climate crisis, still it's 67% of these roles are
Yes,
occupied by men.
men.
So we do see that two-thirds of them are occupied by men and only one-third by women, even though we make up, half of the population worldwide. Now, they did do some research about that, and that book is also in the resource library. So what they took a look at was that if you give women access to education and to family planning tools, okay? So both of these things, because they're so connected. A lot of women who have gotten a lot of education tend to have fewer children afterwards. And so what they found is that by 2050, so this is really the long run perspective, okay? We could reduce CO2 emissions by 59.6 gigatons,
Yes,
gigatons, right? That's so much of CO2, just by giving women or girls access to just education and family planning tools. So we don't need
exactly.
any new technology or anything else. And so this is the biggest thing that in the long run you can do to reduce CO2 emissions that benefits the whole species of us as humankind, right? And that does not even to take into consideration what these girls are then doing with what you just mentioned, right? How are they having an impact on the world by innovating, by inventing, by doing all these things? This is really about, just giving giving
Yes.
them access to all of that. And so my mind was completely blown when I first heard about this, because it's not a quick solution, right? It's not the thing that will get us to the 1.5 goal, a degree goal by 2030. No. But it is something that in the long run, if we start doing that now and combine it, of course, with all technology and everything that we can do to reduce CO2 as much as possible in the short run, then this would have such a huge impact on the entire planet.
Yes, that is true. And I'm a strong believer on like when it comes to education and sustainability. And I'm like part of the advisory board of Earth Academy, that which is an academy that is dedicated to sustainability, learning and studies and so on. And I am currently working on developing a system that educates, kids with like from kindergarten to high school and colleges and so on sustainability, on those 17 SDGs that we have, which is the Sustainable Development Goals, because it's exactly what you said. When they are raised, knowing like what are the goals, what are the right actions to take on a smaller level, and how to become responsible. And I started with my own kids. I have three girls from different age groups, and it worked perfectly when I started with like small animated, you know, uh, um, graphics on like what are sustainability elements, how can you save the world, and how can you just less consume energy by switching off the lights, by making sure that you're using water properly. So the kind of education and awareness from an early age will definitely produce a generation that is more aware, that will get us closer to our goals and objectives, and the Paris Agreement and so on.
Absolutely. Yes. All right, so Miriam and I could, continue talking for hours and hours about this because we're both super
Definitely.
passionate. But I also want to make sure that you get to ask your questions. So if you do have any questions or any experiences or thoughts that you'd like to share, please go ahead and do that in the chat right now. And we're going to try and answer your questions as best as possible. So I do see one comment in here already that I'm going to start reading out while you guys are still like thinking about what you want to ask or say. So Liliana is saying women are 50% of the population. We need to take an active role if we want that when something is changing, it also fits with our needs. And I could not agree more. So that really is true. So that is why this whole initiative here and this event here today is not, to feel sorry about ourselves or to
At
cry
all.
or to do any of that. This is to empower us and to show that there are women out there who are already doing that and that you can also be a part of that and you can also do it, right? So that's what we're trying to do here. So I'm still going to give you, just a little time to ask any of your questions. Can only encourage you to do that. Miriam is a great expert. She has so much knowledge, so don't miss out on your chance.
Thank you, Sandra.
Let's see. So nothing coming in so far. So talking about the SDGs, of course, SDG 5, which is gender equality, is an important one. Miriam, what else do you like? What are your favorite ones? Do you have favorite ones, or what do you think about the SDGs in general,
Well, I
personally?
think like the 17 goals are equally important, Sandra, because they tackle on very different aspects of sustainability. And I think they really took into consideration every single aspect, that goes in the business or in any way, like you're trying to work or whatever. So the social side of it, the people side of it is taken into consideration, whether it's health and wellness, whether it's the training and development, the gender equality, reduced inequalities, the human rights. And then when it comes to like how you work, so there is the energy consumption, there is working responsible consumption and production. So there is a lot of like ecological factors like the life on land, life on water. So I think also when it comes to the economic element of it, like the sustainable communities, the decent place to work, and so on. So they are equally important. You cannot just neglect one over the other. And I hope that businesses do understand that they can tackle different elements. So, because as we see always, as I mentioned in the beginning of my talk, that a lot of them do tackle the environmental areas. They think it is the one that they should go for. While you have easy wins, those are the social ones. So just start by fixing like every people element. And it is important because people are your biggest investment in your business. Without them, without making sure that there's like equal rights for everyone, without knowing that you are implementing the right health and safety measures, without taking care of them, making sure the workplace is decent for them, you will have no business. So start with this, and these I call always the easy ones.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we have a couple of questions and comments now,
All
which is
right.
exciting. So somebody is saying, if we want to tackle this difference, we need to tackle misogynists then. I don't know if it is only my impression, but and then I need to scroll. But it looks like it's becoming a bigger problem. Yes, personally, I do think that you have a point there. And it is something that we see whenever there's a crisis, right? It's what I mentioned in the beginning, is that we tend to go back to that then. Now, there is another question. Innovation was always driven by strong needs and the sense of urgency. Do you think that sustainability has already reached this level?
Yes, well, you know what? Even for sustainability, the concept was developed way back, way back. And unfortunately, it is only with the, increasing risk element that companies and governments are starting to drive legislations and forcing, everyone and taking into consideration like immediate actions and starting this awareness. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, we have never heard of sustainability for years, and then suddenly the wave was so fast. It was part of our vision 2030, and before that only a couple of private sector people have worked with the UN or were exposed to this a new concept, which is sustainability, and they were working with it. But right now, I mean, leading the local network in Saudi Arabia, we started with just, a starting point was 36 companies, and they are giga companies leading the market, like Sabic, like so they're really big names. And it is, again, the urgency factor, the risk factor that actually pushed everyone to go for this. So
Absolutely.
unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. I was so impressed when I visited you earlier this year, of like the transformation that Saudi Arabia is going through.
Yes,
It
yeah,
was so impressive on so many levels, social and ecological.
yes,
So
yes,
it was really great to see that. And I can only repeat what you're saying here. It is something that we see. I mean, I work with these huge corporations, right? And you would think, oh, they're, they have to make money, and they have to make money. But even with them, it is, some are further along, some are not that far along yet when it comes to sustainability. But I do see basically all of them innovating to reduce CO2 emissions, for example.
yes.
And now you might argue that it's because there is a CO2 tax introduced in some parts of the world.
The carbon
That might be
credit as
true.
well.
But at the end of the day, the motivation might not that be important, right? It doesn't
Yes.
have to be idealism. Fact is, they are reducing their CO2 emissions, and that's what the world is needing right now. Let's see, what else do we have here? So, I believe we can agree on the fact that the current industrial structures and the entire economic and social ecosystem has been based on a masculine society more than a century ago. Do we know of any concrete steps that the UN or the EU are planning to implement to change these systems? Unless the fundamentals change, the quota types of measures will not bring too much.
Well, okay, this is really interesting, and it's a point that is absolutely correct. But we need to think that it is only like the UN and other entities, when you compare them to like the power of governments, the power of, so the Paris Agreement was signed by countries, and it's led by Kofi Annan. But again, it's been there for like years. No one acted on that. So those organizations have a limited like role. They are doing as much as they can, but the effect is without the combination of like the government collaboration, it will never reach to this maximum exposure. They will not have the power to change things, unfortunately, because they don't have the power. So with the UN, we had like their office here in Saudi for years, but and the resident coordinator was doing a really great job promoting SDGs, visiting governmental entities and so on. But it's only when we started having this forced and raised by the government that everyone is taking part in that. When we started launching the local network that works hand in hand with the government. So we are hosted by the Federation of Saudi Chambers. Now everyone is on board. So I always say you have, whether it's on a company level or a country level or a global level, if the top management, or in our case, the governments, are not aligned, those can do only so little to change.
Absolutely. Yes. Now, what we are seeing with the EU, for example, is speaking about, I mean, it's not a country government, but it is just, we're all coming together
Yes.
as, or many European countries, is that there is the EU Green New Deal that is being discussed right now. So that is something where we can see that there's change in the making. Germany also already went, a step ahead. And so there's the supply chain law that is coming
Yes.
into play next year and the year after, depending on how big an organization is. That takes a look at your supply chain, how things are manufactured, if you're respecting, human rights and everything. So there are changes that are happening. I do understand everybody who gets a little impatient and says that this has to happen faster. So it is all of like those different key
But
stakeholders working together.
Sandra, also, since we have this passion to change things and we're impatient, start with yourself, start with the family, start with the workplace you're in. Little by little, this combined and collective effort and passion is going to make a difference. So it goes
Yes.
both way, top, bottom, and bottom up. So we
Yeah,
all have an
absolutely.
impact to do. Okay.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. So let's see. We do still have a couple more. Um, let's end with this one right here. How do you approach men who say that women already have all access to education, that they choose to go more often into care work, and all the other bullshit bingo arguments? It's nice to hear so many strong and intelligent voices here, but those who talk about gender injustice are not the problem. Those who willingly ignore it, do not address it are. So how do you approach them? Good question.
Yeah, it's a good question, but numbers, they speak better. So you can show always stats. And yes, she has a point on them saying that they are choosing. But let's look at numbers of like schools and education system that is offering that for women, especially in developing or less developing countries. So there isn't a choice over there. So it's not a matter of like them choosing what they want. And yes, in countries that are well developed, like in Europe, and so you do have programs that are for innovation, for science, for math, and women can choose what they want to be or what they want to become. And at the end of the day, I think again it goes back to the root of when they were raised. They were always told that when she grew up, she was a doctor or she became a doctor. Her role model was like, let's say, her mom, who was a teacher, a nurse, and so on. So why not give an example in the education? So let's change the education syllabus itself and give other example of those leading women in science and innovation and empower the young generation that they can be part of that. Only then you will flare the spark that they want to become a scientist, they want to make a difference. So it's just a connective, dots of things just to reach to that ultimate goal.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you so much, Miriam, for joining us here today and for sharing all your wisdom. I really appreciate that, as always.
Always a
And
pleasure,
thank you to
Sandra.
the audience for asking so many questions and for being interactive with us. We really, really appreciate that. So at this point, I want to encourage you to go to our next session, where we are going to talk with Natalie and Jelena about mindfulness in innovation. Thank you, Miriam, and see you
And
there.
happy International Women's Day, although it's like 2 days late. Thank you, everyone.